regards to that post about like humility and insults and whatnot or whatever was like it kind of had to do with, I guess, in particular, Dante and Raheem had shared a really good video you done, Nolan, on the Mary's perpetual virginity, which, being raised in the whole Protestant realm, I was always under the impression that that was like a Catholic invention. So that video was very eye-opening and very well done. And I guess the specifics I was running into, there was a there was a part you really nailed David Berceau in there, which I got no problem with that. And like there was one part where you're like, forgive me for exposing your ears to like basically this idiot's like rambling or whatever, however you put it. I'm not gonna lie, I did kind of chuckle at that part, like like roasted kind of thing. So I did think it was kind of funny. But I did notice in some of the calls too with some of the guys that they would refer to like different Cathodox people they were communicating with, and they'd be like, "Oh, this idiot was saying this or whatever." And so I didn't mean to condemn anybody with my post. I was just hoping to give like a gentle reminder, like, yeah, like let's exercise humility. We want to be careful with our words sometimes because, we don't want to be throwing around, words like that about people, just flippantly or whatever. So that was kind of my thing with it. Like for instance, I remember watching a movie with my kids in the theaters, and it was about the flood of Noah, and the content was really good for the most part. But I remember I got up in the theater and I took them out of the theater because one guy was just so the presentation style was just very like arrogant against atheists. And it's not that what was being said was wrong or anything, but I just felt like it didn't share a good witness of like how to say these things like in meekness and gentleness. But at the same time, I do know where you guys are coming from because you guys are very diligent in protecting the true faith. So I definitely understand your hatred for heresy, and I greatly admire that about you guys. So don't get me wrong. I think, your guys' protection over the true faith is absolutely admirable. So it wasn't so much a knock on you guys attacking that stuff, but maybe like, some of the presentation style, maybe some of the words being used, maybe rubbing off on others, getting a little cavalier with that sort of thing. So I guess, maybe from that perspective.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Yes, that's kind of what I figured was going on there exactly. So I just wanted to confirm that first. I suspected that it probably had to do with the Mary video, with the timing and everything. There was a lot of. Let me see something here. I'm just responding to something real quick. Okay. There's a lot to say about this subject. I don't. I'm not that. It's something that I'm going to have to probably talk about for the rest of my life, or at least for as long as I do this, unless I retire out of exhaustion. But for as long as I'm here doing this on this earth, I suspect that this will probably be brought up again and again. It's been brought up several times in the past. And I don't even necessarily blame anybody too much for bringing something like this up because of the world that we grow up in, especially if you're coming out of Protestantism, which is extremely effeminate, extremely womanly in their sensibilities and their way of talking and their way of thinking. Um, it it totally shapes you, and then you see something like this, and it's like, whoa, this is crazy. When we're reading the fathers or the scriptures, for that matter, there is also the additional problem. Um, that we either kind of skip over things or we don't fully retain things. We don't really analyze what's being said and appreciate it for what it actually is saying. Or also, just because the language is so outdated in which that it was translated, it almost sounds more polished and maybe like dignified sounding than you could say dignified. I'm saying that with quotes around it. Than it actually would have been whenever it was first spoken. Even older English back in the day could sound crude at times, depending on the way that it was delivered and what exactly was said. But even something that sounds kind of aggressive in older English sounds kind of mild to our ears today. And that's just because language changes over time. So there have been several good translations of the scriptures and the fathers that have been made in various cases, but even the translations that we're working with are fine to assist us with this type of a topic here. But as I was talking about at the beginning, I think that this is something that we're going to be talking about forever because of Protestantism, because it is very weak. And it's coming from its own tradition. It's coming from its own unique mindset. I, on the other hand, and everyone else here who is like me, anyone else that you've heard use this kind of language, you'll notice that they are also extremely engrossed, they have dived right into the fathers and they've been reading the fathers. The question is, are we just extremely annoyed with the heretics that exist today, and because of this anger, this is where this is coming from? It's just because of the uniqueness of the modern day, how corrupt it is, and so we're just especially more angry or something like that than anyone before us? Or are we just like completely just inventing this way of speaking or something like that? On the contrary, the way that we speak in a continued tradition. We have a continuity with the prophets, with John the Baptist, with Jesus Christ, with the apostles, and with the church fathers. They had a completely different idea of this type of thing that we're talking about here. I've said it on several occasions, whether it be the apostles or the church fathers, if they were here on the earth right now, doing what we're doing, they would be much more intense than we are. I can tell you that for a fact. Anything that we've said is probably on the more mild side. We've usually in the past been extremely restrained. So this should inspire a fear in anybody that says that we've maybe gone too far. In some cases, we haven't gone far enough. The sin that's been committed here and the sins that are being talked about deserve this kind of, attack, this kind of vehement invective leveled against them. And again, it's not something that we've invented. It's not like we're just especially angry at the heretics that exist today. A lot of these heresies have existed even back then, and whether it be anybody, whether it be unbelievers, pagans, people who are atheists such as Epicureans, or even heretical fake Christians, this kind of strong language that we display, we have learned from the apostles and the church fathers. Our love and our humility and our gentleness, it is still very much present, but the problem is the definition of terms. Because when the church fathers are thinking about this kind of thing versus the way that they would speak to a sinner or a heretic who believes heresy, they would believe they have a very different idea. I mean, number one, we are not attacking people. That's one of the big ways. Number one ways that we are gentle. We don't kill people. We don't fight people in any kind of capacity whatsoever. It's strictly verbal. And for the most part, it is largely due to there are several contributing factors to it. That the fact that we express our love is the fact that we're trying to bring people out of their stupidity, their brainlessness, and bring them into something that is mindful, that is rational. And also the fact that these things that are evil, these things that are stupid, deserve to be ridiculed. The truth is jubilant, as Tertullian says. And there is an idea that's suggested nowadays. People will say, love the sinner, hate the sin. And they would perhaps extend to that, saying that we should not attack the offender or the sinner, but or the heretic, but that we should attack just the heretical idea. We should attack the heresy, not the heretic, and that kind of thing. But in the church fathers, it's all up for grabs. In the church fathers, you'll have an example of every kind of scenario that you could think of. Not just a heretical idea being attacked viciously, but also a person, a single individual, a person who believes it, a person who comes up with it, and whole groups of people, even ethnicities. And we'll get into that in just a second here. But it covers everything, basically. I mean, this is everything that has been seen in us. This is learned behavior, and it wasn't learned by others. It was learned by the church fathers. And we recognize that raw spirit that was in the church fathers for what it actually is, and we adopted it because we want to be their children and we want to continue in their ways. The Greeks did not have this idea of tiptoeing around other people, and this whole idea of like feelings and this kind of thing. This is very womanly, this way of like concealing your speech or trying to really water it down and reduce it. They believed in a virtue which they called parrhesia. And this wasn't just the Greeks that believed this, or some. I'm not just talking about some philosopher type thing. I'm talking about something that was even believed by the Jews and believed, of course, by the Christians. Parrhesia it's masculine in its nature. Sometimes in some translations, even, if you'll remember in like Shepherd of Hermas, the church, the old woman who is a figure of the church, she says to Hermas, be a man. She says, be a man to him. Be bold, basically. Be a man. It's intrinsically linked with being masculine is parrhesia. It's just speaking very confidently, very straightforward, speaking bluntly, even at the risk of offending someone, being courageous. The philosophers beforehand had praised the concept of parrhesia over politeness. They valued a person who could handle uncomfortable truths and criticisms and could deal them out. People who wouldn't tiptoe around but would just be straightforward, regardless, at the risk of offending others. And this is talked about, of course, is about Jesus in the New Testament. It's also talked about Peter, that they're bold. It talks about Peter in Acts, and then, of course, Jesus throughout the Gospels. Paul says that we use great boldness of speech, and that's what he's talking about, parrhesia. This is a virtue, in fact. It is something that's required at times to be blunt and to be straightforward with people. The Old Testament, it occurs all the time. This kind of stuff that we're talking about here. You can look at just a few examples here, going from Moses to later in David and then in Sirach. Moses at times calls the Jews, just in their entirety, he just calls them morons. And that's not just some English word being arbitrarily translated there from the language. It's the exact Greek word that is commonly used in the Greek Bible, in the Greek Old Testament, the Greek New Testament, is moranos. And that's exactly where we get the word moron. It means the exact same thing, just a brainless, dull idiot. And there are other words, too, that are used. But you'll see this all the time. I mean, Moses calls them morons. So you have a whole group of people. The psalm says, you senseless among the people, you morons. In Sirach, it's quite insensitive. It says mourning for the dead is supposed to last just for 7 days. On the other hand, though, a moron and an ungodly man mourns over the dead all the days of his life. It's a very insensitive thing to say about somebody who's in mourning. Some people would say nowadays to say that they're a moron. And it goes on and on with the Old Testament. I won't give all of them here. There's another from Daniel. He says to the Jews when they had accused Susanna, he says, "Are all of you such morons, you sons of Israel, that you've condemned a daughter of Israel?" And so on and so forth. But then it goes on here with Christ. And curiously, we see on the one hand, there is a golden mean here between the two. There is like a middle ground. There is a danger, obviously, in speech. That goes without saying. You can't be... the flippantness, though, would be towards your brother. And that's what Christ talks about here. He says, anyone who says to his brother, "You fool," "you moron" is the word, more, "you shall be in danger of the fire of Gehenna." But none of these heretics of whom we talk about, or the Jews, or any of the atheists or unbelievers out there, Muslims and the like, or anyone, these are not our brothers. And so we will see later in the same gospel, in Matthew's very own gospel, the same man who wrote that sentence attributed to Christ, that if you call your brother moron, you'll be in danger of the fire of Gehenna. Christ is then later saying to the Jews, "You morons," saying to the scribes and Pharisees, "You morons, you stupid blind people." And then later on, as if this was something that maybe only the Logos could do, because that's what it will eventually fall back on, we see Paul doing the exact same thing. Now, Paul is actually extremely vicious in his in his invective. He's very tough, very serious, very aggressive. Skipping over the one from 2 Timothy, which I have there, where he says, just forget about these moronic questions that people are bothering you with. These just generate strife. He says to the Galatians when he's trying to convince them, he's writing to the people in Galatia who were at one time Orthodox, but that had been subverted and corrupted by Jews who came in, heretical Christians who were trying to impose Judaism on Christians. These same people that he's trying to save, he says, "You stupid people of Galatia." And sometimes it's just rendered as witless or foolish, but the word is that intense there. It is "you stupid people." That is an accurate modern-day translation into the English from the Greek. Somebody could say, well, you're trying to convince these people. Don't you think that it would be better to, tone it down a little bit? Even if you can do it, don't you think you should just tone it down? Because you're trying to convince these people, and I don't know if you're really.
Don't you think you're hurting your message?
Yeah,
you're hurting the message.
You don't think you think, and this is something that we hear all the time. Don't you think you might be hurting the message or something like this? But the same
You'd reach
would
more
be,
people.
Yeah, the same would be attributed to Christ, Paul, the prophets, and as we'll see, even the church fathers. But to top it all off, in that same letter to the Galatians, right after he says, "You stupid people of Galatia," he then, and just a couple chapters later, he says something that is actually acknowledged by many translations and then heavily subdued by a lot of other translations, but you can always look at it. This is what it says in Galatians 5:12. He's talking to the Galatians, and he says, "I wish those of you who are being disturbed right now by these fake heretical Christians, these people trying to impose Judaism on you," specifically in the context, as I put there, it's coercing these people to cut off their foreskin to do circumcision. He says, "I wish they would cut off the entire thing." Some translations say, "I wish they would castrate, mutilate, emasculate, essentially cut off the entire phallus. I wish they wouldn't just cut off the little bit at the end, but they would just accidentally just cut the entire thing off." And that is very extreme. I've never gone that far, I don't think, in any of the videos where I've said that I want any of these people to cut their sex organ off. But this is something that the Apostle Paul says. And then going on from here, we'll see again. We'll see the fathers always using this kind of language. It's right there. Foolish and senseless and moronic and untrained men mock and deride us. So this would have to do with, we're talking about maybe atheists or just people who believe in a different religion, pagans and the like. This is what Clement of Rome says about these people, that they are foolish and senseless and morons. And Justin Martyr, not too long after, says some very serious things also.
You should post some of these, Nolan, just so they can refer to them.
I'm posting all of them in the lounge chat here.
Oh, good. Good. I didn't realize.
Yeah. He says in dialogue with Trypho, he's talking, of course, to Trypho the Jew. So at one point, you know, I mean, this is another example of here we're talking about Jews, and he's talking about them as an entire ethnicity. I mean, he's talking about the Judean people. He says, you know, you people are just, you're ruthless, you're stupid, you're blind and lame people. You have no faith at all. And he's, of course, when he says no faith at all, I mean, he's just quoting Moses there. And he says that you are idiotic children later on to Trypho. He says, you are a stupidly stubborn people. And then he says, you have stupid teachers likewise. He says in this last one that I listed here from Justin Martyr. There are more, by the way. I'm only giving just a few. But he says, you should obey God rather than your blind and your stupid teachers, who even now permit each of you to have 4 or 5 wives, which is what the Catholic and the Orthodox currently do. Maybe not at once, right? Maybe not at once, but they certainly allow it. While the spouse is still alive, they'll go all the way up. They'll go very high up. Very high up. They'll allow multiple subsequent marriages while the spouse is still alive. Can we not rightly, in the same vein, call these Orthodox and these Catholics that they are stupid teachers? They are stupid people with stupid teachers. I certainly think so. And Brian had actually posted this just the other day. I mean, we've all read this before, but just by coincidence, Brian had posted it not too long ago. But Tertullian, who is well known to be one of the sharpest and one of the greatest polemical writers in the Ante-Nicene era, who's, you know, he employs sarcasm and everything, and is very aggressive sometimes in his speech. He talks about Marcion the heretic. He says, you know, if you're not a prophet, if you're not an apostle, if you're not a follower of the apostles, and if you're not content to be a Christian, as in someone who has accepted what has been handed down, if you're none of these things, he says, then I'm merited, I'm permitted to say, go die. Just go die. And likewise, he says about Hermogenes, who had just like a very like weirdly specific idea about, this is, by the way, I mean, this is a guy who's, as far as we're aware, not even like, he's not committing adultery or fornication or murder or anything like that. This is just a man who's saying weird stuff, heterodox stuff about the way that creation occurred. And he says, because Hermogenes was a painter, only if you make your sketches as right as you make your reason, Hermogenes, no painter would be more stupid than yourself. Only if you make your sketches as right as you make your reason. You know, he's calling him unreasonable, brainless. He says no painter would be more stupid than yourself. And there are a billion from, you know, Tertullian, but just regarding this topic here, he says vain and silly topics, irrational topics, you could say, they are met with special fitness by laughter. Even the truth may indulge in ridicule because it is jubilant. It may play with its enemies because it's fearless. Only we must take care that its laughter be not unseemly, and so itself be laughed at. But wherever its mirth is decent, there is a duty to indulge in it. And there is a duty. There's a duty when these people are being so wicked and so evil. They really do deserve, I mean, you have to treat...
Be laughed at.
To be laughed at, to be mocked, because the idea is foolish. It is stupid. You do it a disservice by treating the subject like too honorably or too lightly. You have, for the sake of other people even, this is of course seen in the letter of Jude, especially, but throughout all of the letters of the apostles and everything, when they're trying to convince people, I mean, they're always using really harsh language against the person that they're writing against, the heretics or the Jews or whoever it happens to be in the context. They're being very harsh with them for the sake of people knowing that this is something that is not tolerated, is off limits. If you speak very weak about a subject, then people are going to treat it as weak. They're not going to take it seriously. A line has to be drawn in the sand, and that's really one of the main things that this accomplishes, among other things. I have a few more examples
Can I
here.
say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention something on the topic that you brought up, Nolan, that we have a duty to really mock and harshly attack the most egregious sins. There's a sin being committed every day by people who go out and do apologetics against abortion rights activists or homosexuality rights activists. These are two of the worst possible sins. These are two of the most disgusting, egregious sins. You know, Paul says there are some things that ought not to be even named, things that we wouldn't even talk about. They're so disgusting. But we now in our society regularly, casually talk about homosexuality, one of the most disgusting things ever, and the murder and torture of infants, tearing them limb from limb. We talk about these things casually and have these formal debates. Let's have a formal debate with somebody about whether we can do this, whether it's right. That is a disservice to these sins. The only response we should be giving to anybody engaging in these things is repent. Hellfire awaits if you don't repent of this. This is one of the worst sins, and you know it. Your conscience tells you this is despicable. I'm not going to have a formal debate with you about, oh my goodness, like I shouldn't even, like I'm done talking about it. It's so ridiculous. It's a disservice to these things, to the severity of it, if you don't talk about it in as serious and direct a way as possible. And idolatry is on the same level as homosexuality and murder. It's one of the worst possible sins. It's the sin that Israel repeatedly commits that makes God furious. And it brings out of God some of the most, just some of the most extreme language in Scripture. Maybe the most extreme.
Extreme
the things
language.
he says to his
Oh,
adulterous
Luke.
wife.
Yeah. Oh, I mean the extreme
Not
language
just
from
language.
God, but not even just language. The violence, the entire annihilation of peoples, of everybody getting wiped out and murdered by whether it be the Babylonians or whoever, whatever neighboring country nearby. He brings them in, they get destroyed. He said at one point, things are going to be so bad for you people because of what you've done. You're going to be feeding on your kids. You're going to have babies and you're going to eat them because you'll have nothing to feed on. You're going to be starved. There's going to be, I mean, you know, and obviously, like, we're emphasizing these things right now. There are other things to be emphasized. There are other things to be emphasized about love and these types of things and not being violent. We're not violent people, but it's something that we have to talk about right now. And we have to give the extreme examples to make the point in this case. Yes, they were all wiped out repeatedly. And the enemies were wiped out too.
There is nothing
Let me ask you
stupider.
a question.
On that topic, guys, I can't think of anything stupider than worshiping a rock or a block of wood. It is so stupid. You are a moron. You are at the height of stupidity. There's nobody stupider than you if you worship rocks
Those aren't even your own
and say
words.
that they're your God.
Those aren't even your own words. I can't tell you how many times I've seen the fathers use that phrase. It is the height of stupidity when in reference to idolatry.
Yes,
at least
nothing
3
stupider. And
or more.
listen to God. Listen to the prophets mock Israel. Listen to Isaiah the prophet. We have a lot of quotations of Isaiah and Jeremiah and Habakkuk, and especially, I think, well, also Wisdom of Solomon has a ton. One of the best ones would be Wisdom of Solomon 14 and 15, just how they just rail against these people, make fun of them. But Elijah, guys, never forget Elijah. I mean, mocking not even, you'd think, Elijah, you should be a lot more serious here. Elijah says to the prophets of Baal, he's like, where's your God? Maybe he's busy. Maybe he's on a journey. He says, maybe he's using the bathroom. He's using potty humor, guys. He says, maybe your God's using the bathroom. They usually translate that as occupied. Maybe he is occupied. That's not what Elijah actually said, though.
It's like in the laboratory or whatever, isn't it? It's
Yes.
like,
He says, yeah, he's like, maybe he's in the restroom. Yeah, these things are deserving of it. We go so easy on people. We intend in our future videos to be much more harsh and to sound more as we ought to, and not be so formal, because the formality of these rebukes really just needs to go completely. It needs to be given the way the apostles, the way God himself talks about these things. It needs to be delivered in the same way. But we're not going too far. We're not sinning by being harsh, by rebuking, by mocking, by ridiculing. That is totally scriptural. It's in line with reality. Even if you didn't hear anybody telling you that these things are allowed, but you do, just reality tells you this is the most ridiculous thing. What in the world are we talking about? Homosexuality, abortion, or bowing to rocks? Are you kidding?
yeah. And then, so I posted a few other examples. We're just about, I'm only going to give just a few more since we're getting into the post-Nicene now, but just a few other examples for the sake of it. You've got Basil calling Eunomius a stupid person. I mean, this is just an individual that we're talking about now, an individual heretic. Then you've got Zeno of Verona when he's talking about widows. Now, you have to bear in mind in this, and I posted these, by the way, in the lunch chat, you have to keep in mind that he's talking about widows remarrying, women remarrying after their husbands died. Paul allowed that, okay? I mean, Paul, technically speaking, widows are the only people that are allowed to get remarried, and even still, you've got the fathers all the time speaking very poorly about it, and Paul spoke poorly about it too. I mean, it's, we're condescending, the church is condescending, I should say, by allowing something like that, but it is not a very good thing. And he says at one point, he
To
says,
clarify, just to
mm-hmm,
clarify, Nolan, no, Paul only allows young widows to remarry. Old widows he doesn't bring up. The church has always said that is disgraceful for an old person to get remarried. But go
yes,
ahead.
yes, that's deserving of being mentioned in like the fuller teaching
Zeno,
on that.
yes, Zeno here is talking about an older person getting remarried, not a young person.
The point is, when it would be considered extremely insensitive today when he says about one of these widows, he says, if your husband who had died, if he was a bad husband, a bad man who was abusive towards you, and yet you actually want to get married again, you deserve to be beaten by an even worse husband, second husband. That is very strong, very vehement invective right there. That's very strong language. And Cyril says, when regarding an interpretation, he says, the only people who would fall into such foolishness are people whose brains have been damaged by a stroke. And that type of language. It's all over the place. Lucifer of Cagliari, I'll just give just a couple examples because he goes crazy in this. But he's trying to convince the emperor out of doing something. I mean, he's writing to the guy trying to convince it. But then he's saying that Constantius is insane, stupid, and deranged. He says, an emperor temporarily, but an egregious idiot forever, about Constantius. And I've got more that I could do, but I mean, Jerome, for example, Jerome is he's acknowledged by everybody. I mean, all of them are acknowledged, but Jerome is acknowledged also, the way that he would speak regarding heretics and the like, his enemies or people that he was opposed to. He says at one point in one of his letters about someone that the man is opening his stinking mouth and emitting some foul putrescence. And by referring to his doctrines, he's referring it to like just the most foul emitting bad breath. He says in a separate letter, talking about a Christian who was making these accusations against Jerome concerning the resurrection. He says, you had gone out sailing, and once the filth of the bilge seeped all the way into your brain, then at last you remembered us and decided to call us heretics. And there's many more from Jerome. I mean, like I said, he's very, very intense. But just lastly here, since we had brought up Chrysostom, I mean, here's the irony of bringing up Chrysostom. You had mentioned you had been listening to a lot of Chrysostom, who gives the warnings about insulting others. I mean, not only does Chrysostom engage in this type of thing regarding ideas, individuals, and groups of people in the same capacity, but Chrysostom goes even further than we do, because he said at one point in a homily on the statues, he says, this is from the first homily. He's talking about people who are opposed to drinking ever. They won't drink alcohol, and he says, he says what he says here. I've given the quote here in the chat on the side. You can see, but he says, should you hear anyone in the public thoroughfare or in the midst of the forum blaspheming God, go up to him and rebuke him, and should it be necessary to inflict blows, spare not to do so. Smite him on the face, strike his mouth, sanctify your hand with the blow. Punch a heretic in the face. Now, we know that that's forbidden. I mean, they were getting crazy. They started attacking heretics in later on in the 300s. That was never allowed in all of church history for 3 centuries, 300 years. We would never go that far. We would never allow that. But when you read into the fathers and you're like, oh, well, they're talking about love, and they're talking about very, whatever you're used to, the kind of Protestant language you're used to hearing, typically the fathers might have a different idea in mind whenever they're talking about these things, as evidenced by the way that they speak. And it's not that they're contradicting themselves. It's just that that's not the way that they thought of it. I mean, as far as we're concerned, we don't kill people, and we make an effort to bring people who are in error out of the error and into truth, trying to save them from the fire. That is the display of love. That is the charity that we do. We don't want to see these people get killed and have no opportunity for repentance. We will battle with them, but it is a battle. They are our enemies. And I think Tertullian just ultimately says it best, where it is appropriate, where it is necessary, there is a duty to indulge in it. The truth may indulge in ridicule, especially, of course, with its enemies.
Yes, with the teachers, with the teacher of these wicked doctrines, no holds barred. And if it may be some disciple or some person who comes to us and wants to engage in a debate with us about idolatry, like you saw the other day, we see it every day almost, somebody wanting to defend icon worship, then we'll be harsh. Well, what the world considers to be harsh, we'll be direct. And we will call them stupid if they're stupid and stubborn. And that's not pushing them away. It's not unloving. We have to be direct with them. Their doctrine is stupid. It's ridiculous. It's going to damn them. And all the other people that they tell about, all the people they try to convince, they're committing such a sin against those people. A horrible sin. And you have to let them know. It cannot be some gentle warning like, well, that might get you in trouble someday. Guaranteed to send you to hell if you keep doing that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thank you. There's a lot of clarification there for sure. I guess, I was noticing in, like recognitions, Peter seemed to be very gentle in a lot of his dealings with people who are off basis. But I can also see the whole wealth of other examples that you brought up here. So that was, yeah, it was very eye-opening and very good.
Let's talk about that. There's another book that you should read that's very similar to the scenario of Peter debating Peter debating Simon Magnus, and it's a book called The Disputation of Archelaus, the Bishop Archelaus, and Manes. He's a crazy guy. His name is even connected to the word mania, or being insane, manic. Um, and the church fathers always say, yeah, he's very fitly named Manes because he is a maniac. They always say that. But Archelaus the bishop was going to rebuke this crazy heretic who had taught all kinds of absolute nonsense. And when this guy came into the room to debate him in front of in front of a royal official, a king, I believe, when he came in, Archelaus, the bishop, could barely contain himself. He just wanted to immediately start just making fun of the way the guy was dressed because the guy looked ridiculous. He was in all this brightly colored outfit, looked like a clown. And Archelaus is about to just descend into attacking this guy and exposing him. But other people were standing there and saying, Archelaus, Archelaus, just calm down. Just look at the audience. Let's be calm. For the sake of the audience, the guy totally deserves to be blasted. But for the sake of this audience here, let's just very carefully and orderly deconstruct his ridiculous doctrines, show him to be a fool, and then, we'll be done. So that's what Archelaus did. He restrained himself, and Peter did the same thing because he had massive crowds of people all around him. And Simon Magus was a magician. He had convinced a lot of people that he was God. So Peter had to be very subtle and very patient in his dismantling of Simon Magus, even though Simon totally deserved to just be blasted, and all heretics do get blasted by the church fathers. In that scenario, Peter had to be more strategic because of the crowds.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When you guys were talking, I was thinking that it requires discernment, you know, and that clarified it even more.
It certainly requires discernment, and we're not out to engage in it thoughtlessly or anything like that, but depends on the situation. It depends on what exactly the person is saying, what they're doing, how they're reacting, how they're responding, and a lot of factors that go into it. But there are certainly many times where it is appropriate or to be expected. Um, as far as David Berceau
This
goes,
was
I go ahead, Stephen. If you had something that you wanted to ask.
yeah, sorry. No, this was right. This was a concern of mine too. I remember having a private call with Luke about it because yeah, I come out of the whole Protestant world as well, and I'm used to like, um the sort of apologetic realm of things, right? Where like, both will see each other being like, condemned to hell, but will like be the most like respectful or whatever, and I started noticing problems with that. Like he, kind of I think you guys were helping me with that initially too when I came into the server. But yeah, but then like even just recently my concern still was I remember like just sharing with others too that like, like wondering what's like I'm not very sure, right? Like with that approach, I guess, like how to maybe discern if you're just being like just angry carnally, I guess, and just wanting to call someone names, or something along those lines. You know what I'm saying? Like, um, but I think this has definitely helped me, brought more clarification on this subject because we might have talked about it too once. I remember when Aramis was on a call with us, and you were there, Nolan, too. I think, yeah, yeah. Now, yeah, I actually remember you were there and Aramis, and we were wondering too. Like, well, at least some of us, I think, were wondering too, like about this. But I guess my main question about, I don't want to ramble so much, but my main question is like, how do you know, like, if like, where do you draw the line? Like, is it if you're like, what if you're just being like just mad and you just want to call someone a retard or something, right? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Well, I retard can be used in a derogatory fashion, of course, but I mean, a retardant. When we talk about like a retardant or something like that, I mean, it's just a word. It's just I don't think about things that way. It literally just means to be slow. And if I gave other examples of that same etymological root being used, sounding very similar to the English word retard, nobody would have an issue with it. They'd say, "Oh, that's just a regular everyday word." Um, I mean, when they call you
Well,
tardy for
Nolan, like
school,
you,
they're just calling you slow. I will
yes,
call
tardy
people
being slow,
slow. The
late.
fathers, the throughout the Bible and the church fathers, they do call people slow. The modern equivalent to that would be calling them a retard.
Nolan, what about you? I remember years ago you went over this with somebody. Again, we don't call people retard all day long or anything, but we are now just discussing like when is a word, when is it just a sin? I think the simple answer to that would be if you're being inaccurate, if you're saying something that's not true. If you're calling somebody slow or retarded and they're not, then it's a sin. But just that word in itself, it can't be evil in itself if it is true. By the way, Nolan, remember you were reading other translations of the Bible and you accidentally, well, you came across French. You were reading a French Bible or you were going through it and you found in their translation of it, when Jesus says, "Oh, foolish ones and slow of understanding," they translated it as retarded.
Yeah,
They and they
that
just
was years
Jesus
ago.
just calls the apostles retarded.
I don't remember even
Oh
which
wow.
French copy that was, but it was because I was in French class and everybody in school is giggling when they hear that the word, retard is used just commonly in France. It just means slow. So when he's calling them slow, now in that case, it's not like, hey, we're being slow to get to make our way to the destination. When you call a person slow, I mean that's always been insult. That's always been invective or whatever you want to call it, insult to call somebody slow. And the most appropriate way to translate that into English to give it its the bite that it deserves, the bite that it has when it was said, it would be retard is what it would be. And by the way,
I but I guess my main point though is like, because like honestly, like I've seen online so much like back and forth. I imagine you guys seen it too on Discord too, with like how just people could be saying, calling each other all sorts of things, right? Like I don't really care, right? I mean, I'm used to seeing stuff like that. I think, and I'm guilty of stuff like that as well. But the reason why I think I'm so like I'm really wanting to tackle this one is because I've been nasty with this my own self before, like even recently, just talking to people and like you just get mad, right? Like you get mad with people at times, and I'm like wondering for not just this conversation, but myself too, like what if I'm getting mad like with someone, right? And I just start like calling them stupid or whatever, like I don't know, like am I doing some like am I you know what I'm saying? Like where do I how to like what do I discern if like what's appropriate and what isn't, with your emotions and everything.
well, people who are going to say stupid things will frustrate you. I mean, that's part of the reason that you say that it's stupid because it's so frustrating. If somebody's being slow and stubborn, that will naturally make you frustrated. It's just the question is whether over it's something substantial. You hear us saying it in the context of the most important matter in the world. These people who are heretics are killing people. They're worse than the worst serial killer. They're worse than Dahmer, Ted Bundy, whoever you want to name. They are mass murderers. They don't kill men's bodies. They pollute their soul with heresies. They want to kill everybody.
It is true.
So of course
That's
it's
true.
it's going to be very tough. And if anyone thinks that they would be harsher with um, Ted Bundy than they would be with any modern heretic or something like that, they've got it all wrong. They don't have their mind in the right place. Tertullian very effectively he starts his discourse off with his against Marcion. The beginning of the very first book, he's talking about the place that Marcion is from, Pontus or whatever. I can't remember, like Pontus, I think it's called. Um,
Yes.
and he's talking about he just before he even mentions Marcion, he's just talking about the place that Marcion is from, where he was born, and he just gives a list of the worst things that are going on there. People, I think he mentioned like people cannibalizing their parents and stuff like that. People are just totally just committing the worst sins that you can imagine. The worst kind of people and the worst kind of environment. Just the whole place is just terrible. And then he says everything that I've said so far, none of it compares to Marcion. Marcion is the man that gives this place a bad name. Everything else you can forget about that I just said. Marcion is the main contributor to this place's bad name. He is the worst thing to come out of this place. He's worse than all those other things that I just mentioned. And he names the worst things that he can think of. That's the kind of attitude that we have. Now, of course, people can change. People's substances can change. They can become one thing to another. Their nature, I mean, not substance might sound weird if I say it that way, but the way that like Origen or Clement would talk about it. If you've read their writings, they'll talk about people's natures and how they are a certain thing, and it's through practice, it's through commitment, it's through a habit, it's what you train yourself to be, and it just eventually just becomes force of habit. People say force of habit. That's your nature. That's like what you naturally are. That's your predisposition. That's your natural inclination to react to something. That's the way that you react to it. That's your nature. People can change their nature. I mean, people who formerly used to be an idiot, people who used to be a moron, they can become wise. They can become godly. People who are ungodly can become godly. People who are sinners can become saints. Likewise, people who have been stupid, who are acting stupid, it can be for just a moment in time, and then they can become better. Sometimes I will try to say, not always, but in some cases I will say, you are being an idiot right now, to a heretic or something like that. I will say, you're currently a very stupid person. Try to make it about the now as opposed to something that they are just incapable of changing from. But nevertheless, it is what they are in the present moment. It has to be acknowledged as such. If you're talking about these things, though, Stephen, over silly, unimportant matters, then you should just forget it. If people are making you frustrated over something that doesn't matter, that's not important, you should just say, I just don't want to talk right now. I'll talk to you later. And then just don't say anything. It's better not to say anything. But, I mean, if we're talking about what we're talking about right now, they do deserve the attack. And by the way, I never just make a video saying...
That makes more sense.
Yes.
That makes more sense. Thank you.
Of course. And I never just make a video just saying, David Brousseau's an idiot. Goodbye. David Brousseau's stupid. Goodbye. That's not a 2-second video on the channel. Along with everything, there are reasons for why he is an idiot. And it is articulated very clearly. It is explained methodically and thoroughly. His problems, his errors. And at one time I maybe would have been... It just, of course depends. But with Brousseau, I mean, that's somebody who he's chosen to be the mascot. He is not even a Christian. He just calls him, like I said in that video, I mean, he traded the name for Christ. He traded it for Mennonites. He wants to be a Mennonite. He wants to be named after Menno Simons. So let him be named after that idiot, Menno Simons. Let him be a child of Menno Simons. He won't even call the church fathers fathers. But he'll call himself after a man like that. It's just stupid.
Which one is worse? I mean, seriously, calling yourself after a man, naming yourself after a man, or calling the church fathers church fathers. He's like, we should not call them church fathers.
I'm just
anyway,
too pious.
I'm just too pious. Call me David Brousseau Mennonite.
I'm just too pious to call the people who preserved the scriptures and preserved the discipline and the faith and the religion and handed it down and died as martyrs. I'm just too pious to call them my fathers, my spiritual parents. But I will call myself after this moron who I don't even agree with. I mean, he doesn't even agree with Menno Simons all the way, but he still calls himself after him. It's totally shameful. It deserves to be mocked. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And David Brousseau won't even, we did try to speak with him directly. It's not as if we're just, calling him names behind his back or something like that.
Give him a chance.
Tried to speak with him directly, and I mean, we'll be cordial insofar as we won't fight people, we won't kill people, we won't, we won't even take people to court, we won't do anything. David Brousseau was happy to copyright our stuff or whatever, threaten us with copyright legal action, but we wouldn't do anything like that. And also, like we've done in the debates, when we're speaking with somebody, it's not just like, oh, they give their rebuttal, they take the time to make this argument, and then all we say in response is, you're an idiot or something like that. we allow people to speak, we allow people to say what they're going to say, and then we respond to it. You know, that's people like to bring up Justin Martyr at the beginning of dialogue with Trypho when he gets annoyed by Trypho's friends. And David Brousseau also likes to do this. He gives that as an example of like always uh, like assimilating to like this modern idea of formal apologetics and debate. They're like, oh, see, right here, he's just being so kind, and that's how we need to be. Justin Martyr said that because the Jews who were accompanying Trypho were being loud and disorderly. He couldn't even get a word in. So, of course, he was just saying, you know what, if you guys are going to act like this, I'm just not going to talk to you. And then he was going to go his way. But then at the same time, in that same dialogue, he does call Trypho an idiot several times. He calls him slow. He calls him a moron. And is that a contradiction? It's not a contradiction. It's just we will be orderly in that sense. We won't be violent. We will engage in debate. But when people are being stupid, we will be straightforward about it. By the way, everybody thinks that somebody's being dumb. We're just having that barhesia. We're being bold. We're being straightforward about it, being manly about it, and not, you know, shying away or something like that from the battle. I mean, these people are
There's one
enemies.
thing. Just one last thing. I would say this though. It's like and I'm glad again. I'm really glad we're covering this. I will say this though. I've noticed with you guys, even when someone has disagreed, but they're like at least being earnest about it and want to actually know what you guys are saying, and maybe they're a bit open or not. I've noticed that you guys have not jumped the gun on that one. So
Obviously.
you guys, yeah, you guys only do that. I've only seen that done when you have someone just like out of like just guns blazing at you, and then so then I'm like, okay, yeah, I get. That's why I wasn't so pressed on it myself. There was kind of concern circulating with I think some of us catechumens in here, but this all makes a lot more sense now.
I don't
So
know what you guys have been
yeah, it's just
reading if there's concern. I don't know what you've been reading, what's been in front of your faces for so long. I mean, some of the newer people, like I said earlier at the very beginning of this, I get it. People are coming out of Protestantism, and especially not just coming out of Protestantism, but who are new here and new to the church fathers. But if you've been here for a while, I don't know what excuse you have if you find this to be strange or unusual. You haven't, frankly, been anybody who's saying something like that. You haven't been paying attention to the fathers. You just haven't been reading them.
Can I say something, Nolan, in response to Stephen? Stephen was asking when we should draw the line, and he says sometimes he has conversations where he gets very frustrated and then he feels tempted just to yell at them and be angry, and he's asking, wouldn't that be a sin? I would like to respond to that, Stephen. Some church father says it. I'm sure somebody remembers who said this, but one of the church fathers says that the heretics, one of their main purposes that they serve for the devil is that they discourage and weary the servants of God. Or I think it says actually God's preachers. Maybe it says something like the preachers of the truth. They weary them. They make them exhausted. And so you have to actually restrain yourself from indulging with a conversation with a totally belligerent person. That is a waste of time. You will fall into that trap of just becoming emotional and angry, and you won't accomplish anything. Christ does command us not to throw our pearls before swine. So don't waste your time with people like that. The real danger is that you're going to be wasting your time. Your thoughts are going to be clouded with all these angry feelings toward these people. And you do want to have a calm and spiritual mind, a mind that meditates on spiritual topics and is not filled with just a bunch of anger toward some waste of time person, a person who's proven themselves to be swine. And you should have another thought about them. You should go on your way. So don't let your mind, which is a very precious, important thing that ought to be devoted to God's service and to wise and lofty thoughts, don't let that mind be preoccupied with empty things like just anger toward an idiot. Make sure that you're able to quickly just let go of your anger towards somebody for your own sake so that you can move on and be productive and serve God with your mind.
thank you guys. Appreciate that. Yeah. This this was needed.
Raheem, you messaged me? You have something that you'd like to add?
Yeah, there is something that I would like to add in the case of rebukes, insults, and these things. The fathers have said many things about insults and rebukes specifically, and it's like a medicine, right? Um, and in the instructor by Clement, he goes over the definition of rebukes, and he lists several types of rebukes, reproaches. What does it mean to insult someone, um, and these things. But the goal that Clement was talking about, the goal of the rebuke, is to save someone's soul. It's to correct them. Because the fathers always say this thing about Jesus as well. The things that he says, not just what he does, but things that he says are very instructive to us. The way how he approaches the Pharisees, he calls them morons, fools. Um, and even his forerunner, John the Baptist, um, Clement says that he uses an insult towards the Pharisees when he called them a brood of vipers. And he says an insult is an intense form of rebuke. And these people they aren't flippant in how they use rebukes and insults. You have to look at the bigger picture here. Nolan pointed out a lot of times in this call here, these heretics are sending people to hell. These heretics are destroying souls. This isn't this isn't something that it's not a game, you understand? And this is very serious. Christ took it seriously. John John the Baptist took it seriously. The prophets took it seriously. And they rebuked these people. And they weren't flippant with these things. They wanted people's souls to be saved. And sometimes we have to be stern. We have to be stern, especially with um, leaders of leaders of heretical sects, right? And especially the creators of these sects. I know you point out, various examples, Nolan, of Tertullian and the other fathers being extremely harsh with them. And even in the Old Testament, you have the prophets being very harsh. But you have to look at the bigger picture, and it is to save souls. And yeah,
Yeah. You know, the whole concept of, I mean, these people, I mean, how many things have we talked about that they're committing that were our main enemy, the Cathodox? But, I mean, these people do simony. These people literally practice a form of simony, many of them in the Orthodox, charging for baptisms. When Peter, when this, like, where this, it gets its name from, simony, this act, comes from Simon Magus, of course. And when Simon Magus pulled this stunt with Peter, I mean, Peter just basically told him directly right after. He's just like, may your money destroy you. Basically, I just, be destroyed with your money. That was his immediate response. Just be destroyed. Be destroyed. These people should be destroyed who do stuff like this. There are levels. Everybody always wants to do like the most extreme. Like, well, would you say that to like an honest inquirer who's just genuinely asking? Well, evidently not from the way that we've talked to people in the past, but like I said, there are levels. There's somebody who creates a heresy, then there's somebody who takes that heresy and teaches it. You know, somebody who propagates it, keeps it going, who becomes a leader, or at least some kind of a thought leader, at least to those people. And then, depending on the people who are not even in any kind of high position or anything like that within that heretical sect, whatever it happens to be, sometimes they're deserving of it too. But there are levels to it, obviously, in severity. That's not lost on us.
yeah, definitely, it takes discernment. Um, you know, I know Luke already answered your question, Stephen, but yeah, I, I would agree. You know, again, it's a tool we have in our tool bag. When it comes to refuting heretics, saving souls, and it takes discernment. It takes discernment to know when to use an insult and when to when not to. You know, I'm just reminded. Clement of Alexandria. I think other fathers say it as well. They talk about adjusting your speech, adjusting your tone towards the hearer. Adjusting your tone, what does that mean? Obviously, you depending on the person, maybe you're being a little bit more stern, or maybe if you see that the person is sorrowful for what they've done, you've told them, look, look, what you did was wrong, and maybe if they're repentant, they're sorrowful, calm down a little bit, right? But if this person is stubborn, well, you have to meet them with that equal amount of force. But your goal is to beat them down, beat them down, so that they could repent. And I say this is because I'm trying to illustrate that these things are tools.
Yeah, I think when you guys put it into perspective that heretics are leading souls to hell, and how grave that truly is, what you guys are saying makes a ton of sense. So that's just, yeah, you put it in great context. And I love how you pointed out how you use like discernment depending on who you're talking to. That was, yeah, this has been very good. This is very edifying to me. And the other thing that actually shocked me that you said that was really good too is you actually reached out to David Bercel. So that in and of itself to me was fascinating. Like, I mean, that adds even more credibility to what you're saying. It's not like, oh, we're just saying these things. It's not like we didn't try to reach out to him. So that shows concern over what's happening and perhaps even concern for his soul. So, yeah, this has been phenomenal.
Well, it was even going to be a completely private thing, for that matter. I mean, it wasn't going to be a formal debate or video or anything like that. It was going to be a private call. But yeah, it is very kind that we care more about David Berceau's soul than his own soul. The truth of the matter is that we don't even have that responsibility necessarily. To, I mean, like the David Berceau has everything in front of him. He's killing himself. I mean, he's committing suicide. Really, like a mass suicide. I mean, he's killing himself and then killing everybody else with him who's dumb enough to go along with him. I don't owe David Berceau anything. I mean, every single individual should care about their own life. Every single individual should be concerned with not getting burned. But yeah, I mean, I do. I liked David Berceau in the past. There were a lot of good materials. I really liked the dictionary. So, I used to be a lot softer back in the day. But I do think that I have the right view of it now, considering everything and being more knowledgeable about the fathers now, being more mature. I used to be much more liberal, much more liberal, and just tolerating anything and being such a pushover with it. But it just cannot be. There's too much on the line. It's just not. It's not deserving of the scenario to act that way. And yeah, I think that's generally about everything that we have to say about that topic for now. Was there anything else you want to add with that, Luke, or shall we go on to the second topic?
We can move on.
Okay. Well, Mike, this second subject here, it is very important. Like I said, it's something that we need to address, and we'll have to be very serious about this. Maybe it should have, in hindsight, I don't know. Maybe it should have been addressed first, quite frankly, but it is very important. I want to first preface this by saying all of the kind words that we've said to you up to the present time have been genuine completely, and I still feel that way. Everything that you've said, all of the I have detected a genuineness insofar as like an appreciation of everything, how you've voluntarily, clearly been very appreciative for everything that you've learned and everything that's been made known and all the materials that have been presented and that type of thing. And we have always admired that, and we still do. However, I am troubled to have learned something earlier. I hadn't known about it myself or anything. It was mentioned to me by somebody else who had linked me to it, but it was regarding a live stream or video that you had done last night. I assume that's why you weren't able to do the call last night. Um, the reason that we're bringing this up when we wanted to talk about this, it's not because you couldn't make the call. I mean, if you had something going on, you had something going on. That's not the issue. It's just I see now that this is what you were doing, and the issue here exactly. You know, Luke and I have been doing this for a long time, as well as Aramis. We've seen several examples of different types of people, and you build up, whether people like it or not. I mean, you build up a pattern recognition, basically, and it seems new to a person. Like, how, you know, where's this coming from? But we've been in this scenario before, or at least we've brushed up against it before, and we know what it could potentially do. The first thing really that we would like to talk about is, you know, people have their own free will. You have your own free will, Mike, you know, making videos and stuff. But we're just not really into that, to tell you the truth. We're not into the making the videos about the, especially the flat earth, especially at this time of crucial learning and everything. It's not something that we approve of or have any intention of like endorsing or anything like that. Again, you have your own free will. You can do what you want, but I mean, this is the way that we feel about it. We're running the server here. It's just a matter of if you want to be in it or not. But the reason I bring this up, though, especially the main reason that it's being brought up, is because of the fact of the kind of people that you have involved in this live stream, as it was made known to me. And I mean, there's even a woman in it, I understand. Now, I don't know if you've noticed this. You have, of course. But one of the main things on our that we've been emphasizing so far, at least, I mean, we have many other things to talk about. It's not the only doctrine, but something that we're quite well known for by this point is what we have to say about veiling. And to be engaging with a woman like this, linking to her socials and this kind of thing, oh, check out her biblical this and that. A woman who has no idea of shamefacedness, who's not modest, and is bearing herself and talking. Number one, talking. I mean, even if it was a veiled woman, she should shut up. Nobody wants to listen to that. But on top of that, it compounded on itself. It's not only a woman talking. You're allowing a woman to talk, but you also have a woman that's not even veiled, who's actively committing sin in your presence. It is sin to host something like that. You have to understand. It's not something that can be tolerated. I mean, there's a reason that we blur out women on the channel. We're not going to voluntarily, if we have any control over, at least, you know, in the same way that you have control over how you send your daughter out of the house, what she's wearing. Obviously, we can't control how other people are going to dress, but if we're going to put them on the channel, I mean, we're going to blur them out, because we're not going to continue that. We're not going to subject somebody to looking at that. You understand? So this is what we wanted to talk about. I mean, this is a pretty serious thing. It's not something that we're going to tolerate.
All right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I wasn't thinking of it from that regard, and yeah, and I greatly value your guys' counsel, and I don't want to be doing anything that's, you know, sinful, of course, and anything that's, you know, going to cause detriment to others, of course. And yeah, I will refrain from that in the future. Absolutely. Yeah, I wasn't thinking about it from that perspective, you know. I was, you know, I guess I was just thinking like, you know, hey, let's get together, talk about some edifying stuff. And most of it wasn't about flat earth. I don't, very minimal, probably like 5% of it. Um, Yeah,
What were some of the other
and I
things?
mean, I do. 'Cause, Uh, it was mostly about holiness. It was primarily about like, in fact, we covered, you know, the gravity of, the once saved, always saved doctrine, how the scriptures clearly teach against that. And I was using it too as an opportunity to drop some truth about how much I've been learning from the early church. When I took my turn to speak, I was putting a lot of emphasis on that. And I guess on the topic of flat Earth, I do in my readings, like even John Chrysostom has a thing that I watched not too long ago that was talking about the firmament and everything. So I do think they reject heliocentric cosmology from the writings I've read. Whether the shape of the Earth isn't like a primary topic, obviously in their subject matter, but I do see them rejecting a lot of what modern cosmology teaches. And I think I had a conversation with Luke. I'm not sure if you were there for the whole conversation, Nolan. I think you were there for part of it. But you know how Peter was saying it was a good thing when Nicita and Clement were utilizing their knowledge and their learning of the ungodly cosmological models of their time and the pagan practices, how that was of benefit to Peter because he wasn't aware of those things. And so he was happy to let them discuss those things and then in turn utilize those things to show the error within them in regards to what the scriptures actually teach. So, but I do understand your thing about the women and that, and I will not do that again. Yeah, I wasn't thinking from that perspective, so I do apologize
I
in that regard. And
I have
Luke, just a
yeah,
something
moment.
more to say about it, Mike.
Just a moment, Luke.
Okay, go ahead.
Because I'm still, yeah, because I had asked the question. So there were the other things besides just the flat Earth. I think you probably would have been better off only talking about flat Earth. It's not even really just the flat Earth that I'm bringing it up, just because you guys are talking about flat Earth. But I mean, the concept of talking about holiness with a woman who's talking and who is visible in that way, completely not concealed, is ironic. I mean, it's and then also, I mean, anything mentioned about the church fathers at that point, I mean, it's just in vain. I mean, we've clearly been talking about. I mean, we've been talking about the church fathers, specifically what they say about modesty and veiling for so long. It's just not brought up for any reason at that point. It's just brought up maybe as like a cool fact, essentially, some trivial piece of knowledge. But this is something that we want to enforce. This is something that we want to live by here. Um, again, I'm emphasizing, like, you have your own free will. You can do what you like. I mean, it's your channel. But if you have that video on there, I mean, we don't have anything to do with you, basically, like that. I mean, we're not going to tolerate that, at least here. I mean, we're trying to have a level of unity with each other and be on the same page, and we just can't tolerate something like that to go on. If you're willing to delete it and not do it again, that's good, and that's fine. But if you're not, then that will have to be it, basically.
all right, yeah, I'll delete it. Yeah, because I deeply value this fellowship, and yeah, I don't want to be in error. And yeah, yeah, I understand.
These people that you're speaking with cannot truly contribute really anything to you, anything substantial or important. Um, the idea of like hosting them as if they're like people that are going to give something insightful or useful is ludicrous. These are uneducated people, and you're still very uneducated for the most part yourself. Um, I mean, even Luke and I, the only kind of credibility that we have is just that we've been reading the church fathers for a long time, and we have like a database in our mind of what they say about stuff, which we can refer to and lead people to. That's it though. Outside of that, I mean, I don't have anything. These people don't even have that, so they have nothing. They have less than nothing.
They're still in faith alone by grace alone, Mike. She was repeating that. I didn't watch the whole video, but I did hear her say that much at least, that, I know we're all saved by faith alone, and you didn't contradict, but of course that's just an outrageous heresy. That's just bottom of the barrel, lowest tier heresy, lowest tier level of knowledge. She and the rest of them do not have anything to contribute. How could there be any discussion of flat earth or anything? She was talking about how important it is, she's wanting to get the word out, to get curriculum out to people so that they can teach their kids the proper orientation of the sun and the moon and the stars and everything, as if this in mattered at all in the first place, because of course it's not essential for salvation to know that, but in comparison to something like knowing how you're saved and uh, how your faith works in relation to your actions, that is 100% paramount to your salvation. How how can you talk about flat earth or anything with people like that, who you see their souls going down to Gehenna? They don't know the most basic things. They desperately need knowledge. No discussion of flat earth or any other subject should be taking place, but only exhortation for them to go learn the original faith that was handed down to the saints. That's all that we would want to hear you saying to them. But there seems to be some delusion about them already being in the faith or having something worthwhile to contribute to the world while sinning.
I'd like to
Yeah, I understand.
I'd like to add. Look, I've been very forward. I'm a zealot about flat Earth or globe skepticism. Uh, and that being said, I've been in these circles, and a lot of flat Earth circles are very ecumenical. Like, I mean, you got various self-proclaimed Christians, like different sects, different heresies, but you have non-Christians, syncretists, New Agers, Hindus, who are in these flat Earth circles and associate, and Christian flat Earthers will associate with them, and because there's a sense of a united truth with the flat Earth, they think they can have a big tent movement, but it really it is still being uh, yoked with unbelievers, which we shouldn't be doing. Um, and of course, like, matters of salvation take precedent. Again, look, I still think there is edification. I think there's value in discussion about science, the nature of creation, the position of the earth. It relates to the character of God, what He made, but that has to be in conjunction with the true faith in the first place. Um, and someone happening to have proper beliefs, what I would believe to be the right belief on science, but be in heresies on everything else. Uh, I'm not gonna treat them like in a better place, or I'm not gonna consider them like closer to the truth. Like, they're still very far from the truth, where it really matters. So I got like I've like it's been a year and a bit now since I've been in like a flat Earth discussion, but like right away, it just ends up being like I'm arguing with them about you know matters of faith and stuff, because okay, well, like, the flat Earth thing is now it's now trivial, and I want them to actually believe the truth, but of course they're being stubborn, and these people have all kinds of crazy beliefs, and really, like, I don't want to be fellowshipping with people like that who are off the deep end in ridiculous heresies.
Absolutely. And we completely agree with that. We love talking about nature, what's edifying about nature. And we've been, Adriano always was like one of the first ones to really like to talk about flat Earth somewhat more regularly. I know a lot of others have believed it, or still believe it also, but Adriano always liked to have the conversation about it. We've always been happy to have the conversation. There's never been any kind of intensity or anything like that. I admire Adriano in a lot of ways for how simple, and not that it's like low. I don't mean simple and like low intelligent type thing. I just mean like I respect that. I respect going against the grain. Obviously, uh, I can appreciate that, But and I'll sometimes even go in favor of some of that stuff whenever you're having that conversation here. But yes, we like talking about nature. But here's the thing also regarding the idea of edification in regards to creation. The reason, the only way that creation can become edifying is if you can explain the analogy, if you can explain the spiritual allegory of what the thing represents. You know, when I'm talking about the relation of the sun and the earth and the moon, I'm never talking about just bare facts, okay, about like science or something like that. I'm
How
talking
far
about,
away it is or
yeah,
something.
or even if I am talking about how far away, I'm only bringing it up because I'm getting at the analogy. I'm getting at the allegory for what it represents, and actually bringing it to something that's I'm making it relevant. The way that a Christian does. I mean, that's always been the character of the Christian is to allegorize, is to think spiritually, even about the carnal things. And in fact, these carnal things, these material things, I should say, things that are material, matter. They don't matter if they don't have allegory, if they don't have analogy. If you can't give the allegory, then there's no point in talking about it. And it's like these people who are always talking about Noah's Ark, battling, trying to create life sized recreations of the Ark, and going into intense debate about the logistics of how it could have operated and sustained, how it could have floated and stood its ground against the waves and everything and remained
Where all
intact.
the animals were situated,
How
how
the
they could have eaten
animals,
food,
yeah, just
how
all
the
of the
plumbing worked,
logistics,
how did they
yes,
get rid of the poop? I mean, give
waste,
me a break.
yeah, exactly. And then these same people that invest all this time into it, they don't know why, of all the ways that God could have blipped those people out of existence. I mean, with a simple nod, they could have just been erased from creation itself. They didn't have to be killed. But he specifically chose a worldwide flood. He chose to take the earth and baptize it, as Peter says. These people don't even understand that. So the entire point of God even doing that in the first place, they're fighting so vehemently to try and prove that it happened. They don't even know why it happened. It might as well at that point not have happened. And if we're going to be talking about certain facts about cosmology or something like that, the cosmos, there's no point in bringing it up if there is not allegory, if there's not a spiritual interpretation that's relevant to us. At that point, it might as well not exist.
Yeah,
Into
I guess
the
for me, I
into
guess
go
for
ahead.
me in yeah, in that regard is to me it just reminds me of the three-tiered system that's taught in scripture, how Hades is below the earth, and above the firmament is the waters that are divided above, like the early church I've read a bunch of early church stuff that talks about that, how the water. I was reading Second Ezra when I had to do jury duty the other day, which I tried to get out of because I'm not supposed to swear an oath or take part in a court system, and I was the only person in the room that didn't raise his right hand to take that oath with everybody else, and the bailiff was like staring me down, and it's and then his throne is right above. And I feel like there's so much confusion when you don't have proper cosmology about that he's directly above us, like he says, and the sky will be rolled back, just like the scriptures say, or when the floods came, the windows of heaven were opened up, so those waters above came down along with the fountains of the deep that sprung open. So I do feel like there's you know value in it and pointing to the king who's directly above us rather than in the Protestant cosmology and modern cosmology where they try to fit the word into modern science, where it's like, oh, God's just out, heaven's out in this other dimension beyond this expanding vacuum, and of course everywhere it says the earth is immovable, it's standing still other than when he shakes it, of course. So I mean, those are the value, but I also hear what you're saying too about understanding the proper allegory, which I've seen a lot of that expounded upon as well. So I guess that's where I see some of the value in it as well. Not so much the flat side of it, even though that's more like a catchphrase. It's like the modern way of looking at it. But I think it more so has to do with the firmament that he spent this whole second day creating, and the waters above, and then his throne being directly above that, and then yeah, I guess that's
Well, I'll say
kind of my
two
thought.
things in response to that. First of all, God is not just above us or something like that. I mean, the scripture uses language like this. It talks about his feet on the footstool, it talks about his legs, it talks about his lips, it talks about him winding up to shoot an arrow and this kind of thing. God is incorporeal. God's completely invisible. He's not above us. He's not just above us, we should really say. He's everywhere and nowhere and everywhere. I mean, he's not in one specific spot, okay? I mean, he's not just above us like it's just this directional upwards thing. That wouldn't, even a early Christian who would believe in the flat earth wouldn't believe something like that. But secondly, I mean, you have to appreciate that what you said is just, it's not true. I mean, you have to appreciate the fact that if God has been working in your life, the one person that he brought to you with Luke, I mean, Luke talking to you and myself also, those of us who have been speaking with you, we don't believe in flat earth, and we've brought you everything. I mean, we've brought it all. We've rolled it all out for you. We've done something nobody else has ever done for you. I mean, these people who are in the flat earth, what do they have? The right cosmology, of the right way to thinking about it? A lot of good it did them. They're going to die. Okay? Whether they're right or wrong, they're going to die. The two people who don't even care about that, don't even think about it, don't talk about it one way or the other. I don't talk about it one way or the other. I gave this to you. I brought this to you. God used me as an instrument for that. It just goes to show it does not matter. I have produced the things to you. I've shared the things with you that would get you saved, which is the church fathers. I've given you access to those things. None of these people ever did.
Yeah, I've taken a major step back on that. I guess the only pushback I would give is that, I would say, of course, that God has, brought me these things, and you guys have been a great benefit to my walk, and that's why I believe He led me to you guys, of course. His providential hand. Um, I can't say that it's not true. I do believe it's true, but I do agree with you that in comparison to souls going to hell, it's very, very, very low down on the list of what's priority. And that's why I'm gonna delete that video, because I don't want to lose this fellowship. I don't want to lose all the wisdom that's been imparted to me, the wonderful brothers I have around me. I don't want to spread anything that would be a stumbling block in anyone's life, and would be promoting heresy in any way, of course. Um, but at the same time, I do still stand by what the scriptures say about the earth not moving, and I do see the early church fathers talking about the firmament and the waters above the firmament. So I can't go that far to say it's not true, but again, like you're pointing out, it's in comparison to everything else and salvation, it's very, very, very minimal. But I do think there's a purpose. I do see that in the early church too, saying that even the most minute things within the scriptures have value. Maybe not, they're not the highest on the list, but everything is in there for a purpose, even the smaller things. And I've seen things expounded upon that seem so minimal if you read right over them, but then you'll hear someone like going back to John Chrysostom. I've heard him expound on things that I would have never even noticed and would have thought is almost unimportant. Or in fact, Raheem was, and I think it was with Raheem, talking about no, it was with Brian. He was talking about the Timothy and the wine, a little wine for his stomach, and the quotes that Brian was reading from in regards to something so simple that we might brush over, but we're able to be expounded on in such a greater detail. So I do feel like those minimal things are there for a purpose, but I wholeheartedly agree with you in comparison to people's souls and their salvation. Yes, that there's no comparison.
Well, I've always believed that everything in the scriptures is of the utmost importance. I don't think that anything is superfluous. I've always said that, and I've always looked into the interpretation and spiritual meaning of things that nobody else cares about. I mean, nowadays I'm saying things that people just completely gloss over. On the contrary, I mean, every time that this topic has been brought up, even before you had joined us, Mike, when people were talking about flat Earth, I am the only one who has ever, when talking about it, talked about spiritually why it makes sense that the sun would be bigger than the Earth, but it appears smaller, that it appears the same size as the moon, even though the moon is in reality smaller than the sun, or why the Earth would be kind of like a one special thing with life on it, in a pretty desolate universe, a desolate cosmos otherwise. I've thought about these things, and I've given, even if I am potentially hypothetically wrong, because I don't pretend that I know everything about the cosmos or anything crazy like that, but every time that I've thought about it and talked about it, I've talked about it spiritually, and I've talked about it in relation to the church in Christ. And none of these people who are so, apparently not glossing over these things and talking about these things, appreciating the actual value, I just don't see it. I don't see anything actually valuable being talked about there. Nothing that the early church or Christ or any of the early Christians would say is valuable. I mean, everything that Christ made in the material earth, even if you're going to talk about it, there has to be a spiritual understanding. Even if you're wrong, at the very least that you're thinking about these things spiritually in this way. I mean, that's the mark of being a Christian. Right or wrong, that has to be your impulse. That has to be your way of contemplating these things and thinking about these things. We do it with the Old Testament. Origen says again and again, all the fathers say, what's the story about Abraham going into Egypt? What does this mean to anybody? It means nothing unless we understand the allegory, unless we understand the relevance of it, the spiritual interpretation. That's the mark of the Christian. And anyway, Luke, if you had something that you wanted to say, you can go ahead.
Well, my concern about you, Mike, which is based on pattern recognition, not just intuition, but just that we've met so many people now over the years, is that with flat Earth, it's an obsession. Certain people will get fixated on whatever it is that 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 becomes an object of obsession for them. Would you say that this is an obsession? Would you acknowledge that, or would you say that the flat Earth thing is not an obsession?
I can say that it's not, but I can definitely affirm that for a good chunk of time it was, though. Absolutely. Yeah, there was a time where it was definitely an obsession. Because to me it was so mind-blowing, not to go into the subject, of course. It's not, a valuable use of time, but yeah, there was definitely a good chunk of time where it was. But right now, my obsession has really been, the writings of the early church, because to me, it's just, I mean, I know I don't talk with you guys as much as I do talk with the other guys, in the lounge and everything, and I mean, uh, uh, they could probably attest that. I mean, the stuff I'm pouring over is like, man, all the writings. I mean, I've gone through all of Clement's writings other than Constitutions, which I've just started, and I've already gotten through a third of it so far. And Irenaeus's writings and just all that. So really my focus is keeping my mind. I found this new, what would you call it, what's a good word, my mind's drawn a blank, like training my mind to be set on the things of God and his word and those writings, not only just the scriptures but of course the early church, because I found in the past I've been so easily distracted even by just my phone. just scrolling through nonsense on my phone. And this is probably only the second time in my life where I've found that my focus is almost entirely on the things of God. And so I would definitely say honestly that it is not an obsession for me. In fact, I've almost not been delving in it until this I mean, I share random stuff when I'm on Facebook. I'll share something over onto my page, but as far as making videos or looking at any topics, it's been so off my radar. And that video that I recently made is because it was scheduled way in advance with these people. And so I just sort of like, okay, well, we had this thing scheduled, so let's go ahead and do it kind of thing. But yeah, and I guess, in Enoch it does say that the sun and the moon are the same size in the book of Enoch. And I mean in Joshua it clearly states that the sun stood still, not the earth. And I think it's in Kings where it talks about the sun being moved back and the sundial being reverted. So I mean, there are things that definitely contradict the modern model, and of course the age of the earth thing I'm sure we're all on the same page with. So yeah, I don't know.
If I could jump in, I do want to. I think there's multiple angles. I I've thought about symbolism for the flat Earth model. Obviously, there's some like, I don't know, a month and a half ago, or whatever, this was being discussed in the general. Uh, conceptual models there can be symbolism. You could think of symbolism for a lot of things. I think whatever is scientifically proven as the truth, it's good to think about that and think about what the symbolism would be. Uh, I mean, think about the immobility of the earth, the fixed foundations, that idea. That's represented by God's unchanging nature. The fixed truth. The unchanging doctrines of the church, right? The unity and order that there is in the church. It doesn't have all these heresies and subjective ideas. I mean, consider someone who this is something I would want to bring up to a flat earther. Like I'd agree with them on that topic, but I'd say, okay, like, you're drawn to the idea of something being fixed and unmoving and unchanging, but you're embracing all these modern ideas and are existing in this state of disunity. Like everybody has all these various ideas. Um, you know, Order in creation. That's a big part. Some of these church father quotes talking about the cosmos, the earth and the heavens, and the movement of the sun, moon, and stars. They're speaking about the order of everything, and how it shows God's providence and it shows how it shows His wisdom. I think that's something that should be like, that's the takeaway from, okay, like here's what it's measuring, but what's the significance of that? I do think, like, I don't think it should be diminished. Obviously, it's like I find most of my time I spend. I mean, I try to spend more of my time on doctrinal things, and that's what I find interesting. Like, I occasionally will watch some videos or read something on the shape of the earth and stuff about science because it's interesting, but it's like learning about things in creation. To the same degree, there's people that obsess about health and the physical, the health of their body, right? uh, and okay, you ought not to obsess about these things, but at the same time it's not unimportant. Like, it is good to be healthy, right? And that's, there's further discussion from that, and people have certain convictions. I'm a vehement anti-vaxxer, but not everybody may be against all vaccines. But it's good to have a mentality of, let's try to be healthy. It shouldn't be something people are apathetic about, but it shouldn't be an obsession. I think likewise, uh, science, it's a curious thing. It's interesting, and there can be symbolism from it, but it shouldn't be an obsession. It's but there's a golden mean in there. We shouldn't be apathetic to it either. Uh, but I would never, stop. I mean, of course, I've chosen to fellowship with people who uh, have a different perspective on the shape of the earth. I know I know what is in the order of importance, but I that doesn't mean, any of us have to go back on our convictions.
I did just delete that video too, just as a heads up. So it's gone.
That your only video with women in it, Mike?
No, I'll go through them and get rid of the other ones.
Well, I hope that you can fit in, and I hope that you will have unity in spirit with us, in doctrine and in lifestyle. And I hope that we will all preserve the unity we have. It's a very precious thing that we have in here, and it's very hard to maintain it because anybody can go off the rails. Anybody can fall into a heresy and maybe not announce it, which makes it really difficult to have unity when people don't always voice it. They don't always come out and say it. We would just hope for everyone to be honest and to be of the same mind, but we have to look for warning signs, Mike. So put yourself in our shoes and see we do have to be on the lookout for people who come from Protestant background, have not necessarily fully renounced Protestant background. You may say that you have renounced it. I haven't heard you say that, but you may in a moment say that, and that would be good. But if you still have a lot of Protestant friends, or if you go to a Protestant church, which to us is similar, you may not go to a Protestant church, but you got a ton of Protestant friends who you still call your friends, who you would call fellow brothers and sisters, who you regularly associate with, who you want to make videos with for the world, big public videos where you say, yeah, listen to my friends, this is a must see video, this is essential knowledge, hear it from my ignorant Protestant non pseudo brothers and sisters. You can see why that would be a problem to us. We would say he appears to not really understand the severity of the choice he's made, either to be a Christian or to be a Protestant, that it would mean he can't associate with us and we can't associate with him. We would just ask you to reevaluate everything,
Talk to on
Mike,
shows and stuff.
and reevaluate the importance also of your Flat Earth channel, because I know that you're not just doing it alone. You are in a big group. You have a bunch of Flat Earth friends, and you have a kind of fellowship with them just based on your common belief about cosmology, right? You'd be shaking that up. You'd be losing a lot of friendships. You'd be losing a huge part of your life if you were honest with them about what really matters, which is believing the doctrines of Christ.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And yeah, as far as shaking off Protestantism, I'd love to say I have, but I'm not exactly sure if I have. I'm still learning a lot, and I'm sure there's stuff that's still in my thought process that will need to be corrected with time, and I'm definitely willing to do that. So it's yeah, I can't say that I have, but I'm hoping that I'm on the right path to that, um but even like this discussion tonight, there's obviously things I learned in this process, that I hadn't thought of in that light before, or other things that I wasn't even aware of. And so, yeah, I can't with an honest heart say that I know for sure I've shaken that off, but I'm hopefully being diligent in these things, and I know I'm being diligent in reading the early church writings. I've gone through so many at this point, which is great, and it really has produced such a different level of holiness in my mind and in my speech and everything else. And yeah, so yeah, I don't
That's
know. I
wonderful.
probably have
We
some
praise God.
lingering in there.
Yeah, you'll
Yeah.
have to be honest with yourself about it, Mike. This is a huge challenge. You just got to just be real upfront with yourself because there's no getting away from it. This is a huge challenge. Just the single thing of having a YouTube channel is a huge thing. I also had a YouTube channel. I used to make movie reviews and video game reviews and all kinds of things years ago. I'd put a lot of work into it, and many years went by. Um, I had to delete everything. I had to delete every single video I ever made. Some of them I made a lot of money from, and I was still regularly making money every month from videos. I had to delete everything. So it was a financial loss. It was a loss of reputation that I had to lose my YouTube channel where I had made a name for myself and just boom, blip, gone. Had to be wiped from existence. That was a sacrifice. And you have something going on here that I fear is similar, that there's so much in those videos, maybe so much Protestant stuff, so much heresy, or stuff that you would come to eventually be ashamed of, and it would be a challenge for you to let go of it. So I just want you to be aware of it, to know that is what's facing you right now. There are all kinds of challenges, all kinds of obstacles that tempt us to fall away or to just abandon what we know is right, uh, forsake the right path. And it's sometimes it's little things like this. I don't know if you see it as little. Maybe you don't see it as little. Maybe you see it as big. I don't know. We have to be careful not to deceive ourselves. It's very important in a time like this to be really, really honest with yourself. Totally evaluate yourself and how you really feel about these things. How attached you are to these people, to the channel, to the whole community you have built around Flat Earth, where you seem to be a leader. You know, you have a big channel, or at least it seems like people enjoy the Flat Earth Archive channel that you have, and also the Facebook page. You are facing a big loss here. So be honest with yourself about what might have to happen, what might necessarily happen in order for you to fully embrace the faith.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't, to my recollection, I don't think I don't have a lot of doctrine in there. A lot of it's like observational, like how long a boat takes to travel a certain distance and would it have disappeared over the horizon. We're talking about like Selenelian eclipses and stuff like that. But thankfully, I don't make any money off it. And I'm flattered that, well, not flattered, I guess I should say it's cool, or I don't know how I'd put it, that you would think I have a big following. But in all honesty, if I disappeared tomorrow, I doubt many people would notice. And maybe that's God's grace in my life. I feel like anything I put my hand to in regards to these things, I'll watch other people explode and take off. But my stuff is my stuff is not to that degree, and I've never made money on it. So I've always tried to keep that part of my thing. Anytime I've shared something, it's always just been at my own expense of my own time and whatever else. So there's no money lost there. So that's a plus. Um, but yeah. But the women, there's definitely two other videos that I can think of where women are in there, and I got to get rid of those. The rest, I don't think it's all just observational stuff that you guys probably wouldn't be interested in, but it's not really like doctrinal related. It's just like observational sciences. Like I said, Selenelian eclipses and, things of that nature.
And you know more about it than we do. I mean, maybe somebody could go watch all the videos on your channel and give you some honest advice about what they think you should do with it. We don't have the time to do that. So um, definitely, definitely keep all that in mind, that Satan will try to tempt you to compromise. If there's anything that you've held on to sentimentally, or any friendships that you've had for a long time. We all lose friends when we become Christians. It's part of the
Yeah,
process.
that's the biggest loss right there for sure. I'm not going to even pretend that that's not hard. It definitely is. But, I mean, if we're called to if we want to save our lives, right, we got to lay down our lives for him. And I totally understand that. I don't know if you were part of this conversation, Luke. I can't remember who I talked to. I don't think you were part of it, but probably my most prized possession on this earth was this jacket I've had since I was 17 years old.